Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to TPM. It's kind of a drizzly day out right now, so I figured we'll talk about some stuff inside the shop today. So the last video I did a couple days ago, we did some prone shooting and I was using the rifle behind me, this really nice Vudoo 22, and I had a couple people asking about the tuner on the end of it. So we're going to talk about that for the next few minutes. So to start out, this is an EC Tuner V2. It's made by Erik Cortina. I can put the link to his website down at the bottom. I'm not affiliated with Erik Cortina or his products in any way, so this is something that I just wanted to test out to see how it worked. And 100% honesty, this is my first experience with any sort of tuner whatsoever, so it's been a very interesting trip so far, and all I can say is I'm very impressed, and I think they do make a difference. So over the next few minutes, we'll talk about kind of how they work, why they work, what they're good for, and what they're not good for. So let's check it out. All right, here we have a close-up of the tuner on the end of this barrel. Once again, this is the EC Tuner V2 made by Erik Cortina, and this one's made for any half 28 threaded barrel. It fits really nicely with this kind of medium heavy contour barrel on this 22. So how the tuner's constructed, we have this base back here, and this was what's threaded half 28. And then up here we have this rotating ring, and this is the weighted portion that can slide in or out as you rotate it counterclockwise or clockwise. And it has 50 different hash marks around the circumference. So each of the hash marks are separated by about 1/8 of an inch. And then we have letters at the 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and the 9 o'clock position. And all those do is allow you different reference points to line up your numbers so you can jot that down and refer to it in the future if you change the settings on your tuner. So now let's kind of talk about barrel harmonics and how this guy affects them. All right, in a previous episode we talked a little bit about barrel harmonics, but just a quick refresher. So we have an explosion that happens back here at the chamber. That explosion initiates a harmonic frequency or a vibration or an oscillation, whatever you want to call it, that travels the length of the barrel. So when it gets down here to the unsupported muzzle end, that's where our frequency, our vibrations are going to be the greatest, and that's what changes our point of impact downrange due to the bullet leaving at different points during this frequency. And this is greatly exaggerated. These vibrations are very, very small. So we cannot stop the harmonic frequency altogether. So the only thing we can do is try to mitigate the effects of the frequency. So there's a couple different barrel manufacturers, Straight Jacket, who make a structured barrel that tries to eliminate this, and they do a pretty good job from what I understand. I don't have any experience with them, but I do have some experience with this tuner right here. So now let's get into kind of how the tuner interfaces with this harmonic frequency that we see that travels down the barrel. Before we move on, it's important to note that there's a couple different theories on how this harmonic frequency travels down the barrel. One of them, this frequency originates back here at the chamber and it travels to the muzzle end where it reflects back from the muzzle and heads back to the receiver, and it continues doing this back and forth in a series of wavelengths as it travels until it dissipates all of its energy. So the other theory is this harmonic frequency is more constant and it shows itself out here at the muzzle end and it continues to oscillate like that until it completely dissipates and the shot cycle is over. So to be 100% honest, I am not sure which one is more correct, but either way, we are manipulating the effects of that vibration or that frequency with the tuner on the end of the barrel. So now let's get into kind of how the tuner works and why it works. All right, as we dive into this, I'm going to reference Dan Newberry's optimal charge weight method, simply because the whole premise behind that method is it uses the optimal barrel timing theory to find when our muzzle end is at its lowest point of harmonic frequency, which gives us that very pressure tolerant and resilient load during the load process. So now we have our tuner on the end here. There's a couple theories on how this is affecting our harmonic frequency at the end of the barrel. And the most simple, the most basic theory is we're simply adding mass and weight to the end of the barrel, which should dampen the harmonics a little bit. So the more advanced theory behind this is we're effectively changing the length of the barrel as we screw the tuner in and out. So what that does is very similar to Dan Newberry's OCW theory, in that we're changing the length of the barrel to time the exit of the bullet to essentially what's a dead spot in our harmonic frequency or a lower spot in the vibration. So Both of those theories make sense to me, and I think it's honestly a combination of both, because there's folks out there who have done tests and they simply attach some weights to the end of the muzzle and it does make a significant difference. So that is the basis for how this tuner works. There's probably a more advanced explanation, but that's how I understand it works. And I can show you the target like I mentioned before, and we can kind of walk through how I tune it next. All right, back up here at the muzzle end, we have our EC tuner with the 50 hash marks around the circumference, and we just simply rotate it like that to change it. And it has a fair amount of tension on it, so it won't come out of adjustment when you're shooting. The back of the unit threaded onto my barrel, so the A is pretty much at the 12 o'clock position. So that's going to vary depending on your muzzle threads and the shoulder of the threads and everything else. So don't be concerned if the A is at some other position on your tuner if you choose to use this. So the way I started was I lined up the 0 kind of in the middle of the A. So I have a good reference point to come back to if I need to change this. And typically in the NRL 22 matches, we shoot anywhere from 25 yards to 200 yards. So I chose 100 yards as my distance for the testing. And I put up enough targets so I could shoot several groups without getting up and changing my position or doing anything else that would skew the results of the test. So I started at 0 and shot a 5-shot group, transitioned over to another target, and I shot a 5-shot group at 45. So I rotated the tuner so it was going down. And then I continued this in 5 hash mark increments until I made a full 360-degree revolution. Now, everything that I've read and everything that I've heard says that you should be able to accomplish all of your tuning goals in one full revolution of the tuner. So that's where I stopped. From there, I found my sweet spot, which is very evident, and you'll be able to see that on the target here in a second, but I dialed in a little bit finer increments for the second round of tuning, and I've shot from the 45 hash mark all the way up to the 5 hash mark, and I moved it in 1 hash mark increments each time, and I shot my 5-shot groups from there until I had it dialed in. And what I found was, coincidentally, the 0 lined up with the A where I initially had it is the sweet spot for this particular setup, the ammo that I'm shooting, the rifle, and everything else. So that made it pretty easy, and it's a nice reference point. So I jotted that down in my logbook and I took a picture of it with my phone, so I'll be able to return to this adjustment with this ammo at a later date if I do change it. All right, here we have the target I shot during the tuning process. In the upper left-hand corner, we have the 0 hash mark group, which is 5 shots, just under 3/4 of an inch at 100 yards. So very good. Then we go over to the 45 group, which is the first increment of 5 hash marks down from 0. And we have a .577 inch group for 5 shots at 100 yards with this 22. So in my experience, that's a very, very respectable group at 100 yards with a 22 of any sort. So we go to the 40 and it just opens up ever so slightly. And then at the 35 is when we see a lot of change. So we open up vertically and horizontally for the 5-shot group there. Then that continues in 30 and it starts to tighten up horizontally in the 25 and 20. And then 15 we start to see our horizontal come back and our vertical stays fairly tight. Then we get back to the 10 and that's when we see groups very similar to what we saw at the 0 and 45 hash marks. So that's a .607 inch group at 100 yards, and then the 5 hash mark group is just out of the picture, but that was a .652 5-shot group at 100 yards as well. So what I did from here was I saw that I had very, very good consistency all the way from 40 up until 10. So I shot a 5-shot group at each tick mark in between those numbers. So that was 20 different groups that I shot. And I determined that the 0 setting was actually the best setting. So I continued to shoot some groups with that setting and I shot it all the way out to 200 yards and had some really good results. And unfortunately, I don't have that target to show you guys, but at 50 yards, this rifle will definitely put each one of those Wolf Match Extra rounds into the same hole. So having groups that measure well under 200 thousandths are the norm for this rifle as it sits here in front of you today. All right, so I hope that did a decent job of explaining how these things work and why they work and what I use as far as the tuning process. So I had a question that was asked, and basically the guy wanted to know whether there were any negatives or disadvantages to running one of these on his rifle. And I had to say, honestly, yes, there might be, but they're very minor. So first of all, we're adding a little bit of weight to our muzzle of a rifle. So if you're in a class that restricts the weight of your rifle, that might be an issue, but you can always circumvent that by taking weight out of somewhere else if you really want to run this. Second of all, you're adding a little bit of length if you're coming from a bare muzzle. So if you have to have your muzzle threaded for this, you're going to add about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches for the tuner alone. If you go to a tuner break, then you're going to add maybe 2.5 to 3 inches with that device, depending on if you have a 2-port or a 3-port break. So in my opinion, these are definitely worth it. They do cost a little bit of money, so that might be a downside as well, but the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages. And from what you saw on that target, that's a 100% awesome representation of what these can do to affect your accuracy downrange and consistency. All right, now that we talked about the benefits and disadvantages, let's talk about what a tuner or a tuner break will not do for you. So first off, and most importantly, this product will not take a rifle that shoots 3 to 4 minutes of angle and turn it into something that shoots sub-inch or sub-half minute of angle. It just doesn't work like that. These are for fine-tuning your rifles and load combination that's already very accurate, and you're looking to squeeze that very, very last bit of consistency and accuracy out of it. So that's not to say that you couldn't put one of these on a rifle that shoots huge groups and you wouldn't see an improvement, but is the improvement worth it? So having a rifle that has a large dispersion in the group would tell me that there's something either wrong with the rifle, the load, the scope, or something else. So that needs to be addressed before we go and experiment with a tuner. So another thing you have to pay attention to if you are shooting factory ammo. So if you're restricted to shoot factory ammo for competitions or hunting or whatever it may be, you have to pay attention to the lot numbers on the ammunition that you have. So I've done a lot of testing before with Federal Gold Medal Match and some of the Hornady ammo, but from lot to lot, there is a significant amount of variance between your velocities and the performance of each of those rounds. So you might have one setting that works for one lot of ammo, and the nice thing about a tuner like this is you can record that information down in your logbook and go back to it if you ever shoot that lot of ammo again. But you may have to experiment with each lot of ammo and get your separate tuning settings for the best performance. And another thing that came up in a recent conversation with a gentleman was he seemed to think that these tuners were some newfound technology that's going to revolutionize the shooting world. The fact of the matter is that tuners have been around for a long time. Just go ask any bench rest guy. But Browning has been integrating their Boss muzzle brake into their rifles for as long as I can remember. They've always had a Boss equipped rifle. And this is effectively a tuning brake. So this allowed hunters to use factory ammunition and get some really good results by adjusting the brake. And Browning even offered preset settings for known load combinations that worked pretty well. So they still offer this combination, which I think is really cool to have on a factory hunting rifle. So one of the things and some of the trends we're seeing in the development of these tuners these days is they're becoming more practical, more compact, and easier to use. So before, a lot of the bench rest tuners were these massive objects that would throw the balance off of the rifle, and they just weren't practical for an NRL match, a PRS match, or hunting. So now we're seeing these things that come in forms that are much more practical. They don't add a lot of weight to your rifle, they don't add a lot of length, but they still make a huge difference in how your rifle shoots. So I went through the tuning process that I used for this Vudoo 22 behind me, and that tuning process is the same that you would use for a centerfire rifle shooting factory ammunition. So you might want to take it back to 3 rounds instead of 5 rounds per group. But if you have the means to shoot that ammo and you can afford it and you don't mind sacrificing a little bit of barrel life to get the most out of your rifle, then shoot 5-shot groups. It's just going to cost you a little bit more money. So that being said, the process for using one of these on a rifle that shoots hand loads is going to be a little different. So all this is doing is introducing another variable. It's a controllable variable, but it's still a variable nonetheless. So how I would do this is I would do my initial load development using Dan Newberry's OCW method, and I would find my best load with a bare muzzle. So either a thread protector or something, and that just eliminates any sort of variables that we have. So we know that our load is as good as it can be without any other thing helping it. From there, once I had my load dialed in, then I would go through the whole process with dialing in the tuner. So that's going to extract every single last bit of accuracy out of that load that you landed on. You might see a difference and you might not. It all depends on the rifle and a whole bunch of other variables out there that we cannot predict, but it wouldn't hurt. And from my experience, it's not going to detract from any accuracy or consistency that you'll see on target. All right, guys, that wraps it up for today. Hope that was interesting and informative. The whole barrel harmonics thing is something that I've just recently dove into, and I find it very interesting. So I'm going to be doing a lot of this stuff lately. I have a really cool test coming up that's, as far as I know, something like this has never been done, but it's going to remain a secret until I actually take you guys through it on the YouTube video. But in the meantime, check out the EC tuner brakes. I have a Salmon River Solutions 30 caliber muzzle brake, tuner brake coming that we're going to do all the testing on together. And I'm going to take you guys through it step by step, and we'll see how that affects my 30 caliber. And we'll probably shoot that in the Accuracy International because it's already a very accurate platform. But in the meantime, head over to the website, take a look at these nice hats, and thank you guys for all the support, and we'll see you next time.